First, we have Kirby Crow. Kirby is a financial advisor with Natural Investments, where she helps investors better align their investments with their values. She's a Greenville native and has previously worked with Goodwill Industries of the Upstate Midlands and with Upstate Forever. She recently completed another year volunteering as a tax preparer with United Way of Pickens County's Biden program. Thank you for being with us. Tom Johnson is a retired chemical engineer. He studied personal finance, so a little tidbit that maybe many of us don't know. And he passed the CFP board exam. He spends his time loving the outdoors and volunteering in organizations such as Just Faith, with Village Engage, and Gold Justice. His aim is building a more just and inclusive community. And finally, Amy Sanders. Amy is the founder and president of State of Inclusion Incorporated, which focuses on building more inclusive and equitable communities. She's also the host of the podcast, State of Inclusion. Here in Greenville, she's volunteered in numerous positions in the areas of public transit, poverty reduction, nutrition, and child well-being. Prior to founding the State of Inclusion, Amy held various senior management and executive positions with Michelin North America. At this time, Amy is going to kick off our conversation.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I hope this isn't too loud. So thanks to all of you guys for being here and for you guys on Zoom as well. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge the elephant in the room that we have right now, which is prices are up, investments are down, things are tough, and we have an economy that's not working for a lot of people. But I believe that there's no better time than now for us to set our intention to do something different and better. And it's time for us, once we do that, then to not hunker down, but double down. So based on that, I want to suggest a little activity for us before we get started with the panel. I think it would be good. So you guys should have in front of you a handout and a worksheet. And online, you should have a link to that so that you can access that as well. If you need a pen, I think there's some in the back. So I want you to take a few minutes, and at the top of the worksheet, there's a question. In what ways do I want to be more intentional with my giving, investing, and buying? So we won't have time to share these with each other, but maybe you could take a minute and jot down a couple of ideas that you have for yourself about how you want to be more intentional in any of those areas. And just could be a few words, a phrase, whatever. So just take a couple of minutes and do that before we get started. That's one like you captured your thoughts, centered yourself a little bit. Kind of always helps me to listen differently when I reflect on what's important. That's the second, that last thoughts. Now that we've centered ourselves a little bit, we can hear from the panel. So I want to start with Tom. So Tom, I think you were the inspiration for this session. That's not what Alicia said. And so I wonder if you would tell us a little bit about kind of the experience that you had. What prompted you to think more intentionally about your investments? What you did about that and kind of what you learned so that we can learn along with you. Yes.
Sure, Amy, I would be happy to share that. I didn't realize what was gonna happen after that little trip that we took, that I guess became the impetus for this discussion today. It's good to be with you all this afternoon, and I feel humbled in the presence of these two ladies who are very, very knowledgeable about the topics we're going to discuss today. But it all goes back to a trip that we took. We were laughing as we entered here this afternoon. Back in 2018, at the time, it was just faith community gathering involving several congregations. Village Engaged didn't exist as such yet. And we went down to visit three places. Koinonia Farms, which Clarence Jordan formed as a biracial farming community way back in the day, as you guys may know. And we went to Jubilee Partners organization, a Christian community that is involved in servicing immigrants who had suffered persecution and violence. And then the third trip was to a little ministry called El Refugio and to the Stewart Detention Center. El Refugio serviced or walked alongside those who were being detained at the Stewart Detention Center. That was a detention center for immigrants who were not documented as they were awaiting processing of their cases. And El Refugio walked alongside them and also served their families. So I'm gonna tell you what happened after we got back, but I need to back up and just reiterate, I'm a chemical engineer by training, spent 33 years in the industry. When I retired from that, as Alicia mentioned, decided, knowing a little something about personal finance might be helpful. So I did some study and sat for that CFP board exam. And everything I was learning about investing in that process was all about how to maximize return. And I learned of a technique called passive investment, which is basically investing across the broad scope of everything out there in the market, not trying to pick winners and losers, keeping costs low by being in index funds. And the understanding was that overall will provide you with the highest level of return. And it appealed to me also because of that passive part. I knew I didn't want to be one that was going to be spending a lot of time studying markets and chasing dollars. So I was invested in that manner when I went down to this trip. I came back and I found, well, we had a discussion about the Stewart Detention Center, which was a privately, or rather a private company, not a public company listed on the stock market. And it's all about the privatization of prisons and detention centers, which is going on. And to my dismay, when I studied the mutual funds I was holding, I found that indeed I held a little bit of stock in Corrections Corporation of America, which was the name of that organization. And I thought, I don't want my return to come from that kind of investment. I thought about how a company like CCA is trying to maximize profits. And what might they do to maximize profits in an industry that is so out of sight, out of mind as detention centers? So long story short, that became my impetus to get serious about looking at socially responsible funds. And I have moved into that area. And I will say it's better. It's less than perfect. I can feel good about not being invested in companies like CCA. And I can avoid industries such as alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, and favor industries that have more diversity in their boards and management staffs and that sort of thing. So generally speaking, I can feel a whole lot better. On the other hand, I realize that's really baby steps. I'm still invested in our capital markets, which of course in this country we worship to such a great extent. And, you know, I'm not gonna, well, all I will say about our capital markets is, do we dare to think about what that means in terms of they require an ever increasing amount of consumption to drive them in our very fragile world where we have extracted so much already. And it's such a large intertwined system. So I don't have any stock in CCA anymore, but I have stock in technology companies, for example, that I'm sure are servicing CCA and enabling them to operate. So I am wrestling, as I think many of us are, what is the right thing to do? And I'm here to listen and work with the rest of you about things such as questions such as, what's the right giving versus investing balance for a person like me, who's very much a person of privilege, and I recognize that. Am I giving sacrificially or am I giving from excess? How can I invest more locally in efforts that strengthen our community rather than this big broad market? And how can I be more mindful of the ways that I shop and consume? So I'm with you. I'm here to learn today and I'm very grateful. Thank you.
So I'll just turn next to Kirby. You keep the mic. I'm pretty loud. So Kirby, you help investors every day like Tom. And we're grateful for Tom's story and the fact that you share the experiences you had. And so Kirby, what we want to ask you is, what are some of the ways that you help people today? What are some of the ways that people can be more purposeful and intentional in their investments? And maybe along the way, Tom, you can share a little bit of your story, maybe why you do this work.
Sure. Thank you so much for that. And thanks all of you for being here. It's really nice to see everyone today. And Tom, that was such an interesting intro. I feel like we could have a much longer conversation about everything you just said. But my name is Kirby Crow. I'm a financial advisor with Natural Investments. It's a small firm, very experienced and longstanding firm that does socially and environmentally responsible investing. I'm a Greenville native, very proud of that, to still be here in my community. And like Alicia said, I've worked at Goodwill, and that's where I met Alicia, so very glad to make that connection. And just before I say anything else, I have to say that I am not giving investment advice. This is education and ideas. Please consult your financial, tax, and legal professionals. So investing with intent is something that I think about every day. It's literally my job to help people think through that and be a thought partner with my clients. People think being an advisor, and I think most traditional advisors, it is a lot about the literal maximum number, the highest profit that you can eke out. And socially responsible investing definitely can still be profitable, but most of the conversations and most of the work I'm doing is qualitative work in another direction from that. So I see kind of three investment pathways that I talk with my clients about. One, and for the clients that I have here in Greenville, they're interested in how can I invest locally? And this is something that Amy's going to touch much more on, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. But, Greenville has a very robust philanthropic community, no shortage of opportunities there, investing opportunities, much fewer. So when I have those conversations here, I really like to direct people towards community development financial institutions, CDFIs, credit unions, and in particular, self-help credit union, which is probably familiar to a lot of you. They're doing excellent work with combating predatory lending, getting people out of the payday loan cycle, getting them financially stable, and eventually moving them into asset ownership, especially home ownership. And that can, lead on the pathway to generational wealth. So it's an incredible journey. They offer a product that's essentially a certificate of deposit, a CD. It's something where you invest a certain amount of money. They hold that for a fixed amount of time. You receive interest payments periodically, and then you get your principal back at the end. So, very fixed, stable, safe investment. And when you open a CD with them, you're expanding their power to lend to their target communities, and also just supporting a cooperative form of ownership, which is the whole credit union model. So just that adds to a kind of equitable service here in our community. So that's one thing. I'd say the second way, and this is where I spend most of my time and will probably be familiar to most of you, and this is what Tom was talking about, is when you're getting into publicly traded securities, whether that's through a workplace retirement plan, a 401k, or in our own brokerage accounts, IRA accounts, 529s, et cetera, et cetera. So when you're in a 401k, you've got a very limited menu of mutual funds that you can choose from. So your, ability to impact there can be limited. So when you have your own individual accounts, the world's literally your oyster. You can choose from anything. And that's where a lot of people get overwhelmed into what investing decisions am I making. There is a terrific tool. Well, let me back up for a second. The first step in that journey of conquering that overwhelm is understanding what you currently have. What investments do you own in your 401k? What investments do you own in your IRA? What's in that S&P 500 mutual fund actually? We talk about the S&P all the time. What do we mean by that? And so one tool that I love and recommend constantly and use myself constantly is a website called As You Sow, SOW, As You Sow. They have a screening tool called Invest Your Values. The one that I kind of use as my baseline is their fossil fuel free screen. So I can type in the name, the ticker symbol of a mutual fund. It will give it an A through F rating, just like you're back in school. And if you scroll down to the bottom of that same page, you can see the ratings on all of the other screens as well. And so that includes things like private prison screens, weapons-free screens, deforestation, gender equality. So it's such a powerful tool because it shows you exactly what holdings are problematic in what funds, and it's very stringent. And so then once you find out what you're actually holding, then it's time to make some decisions. And that's where a lot of, the wrestling comes in. When you have a mutual fund that has a very, 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 very tiny percentage of a company that you find objectionable, are you going to dump the whole fund? What are you going to do? What feels right for you? What allows you to sleep at night? What allows you to align, your values with your money? And frankly, an advisor is really helpful with that. I'm trying not to be biased here. There are ways to do it DIY, but and hopefully I can share some tools afterwards in the Q&A and maybe through email as well. I can share some ways that people are trying to embark on that journey on their own. And then the third investing path, and you alluded to this as we're starting to question capitalism, but private investments, so things that aren't on the public market. And I know you're going to touch on this too. So these are investment opportunities typically for accredited investors, which is shorthand more than $1 million in investable assets. Very high impact, very high risk. So definitely not for everybody. This is a different type of investing. But essentially, you're providing seed money for community projects or startup businesses that are making the kind of changes that you want to see in the world. tons and tons of different types of opportunities there. But I think I just dumped a lot of information on you. I think I will cut myself off and pass to you and just, am happy to answer more questions in the Q&A and continue conversations over email after the session as well.
Thank you, Kirby. That is a lot of good information for us to think about how we want to be more intentional with our investing and ideas of how to go about doing that. So, thank you. So I'm also glad you mentioned, both of you mentioned local investing, because if I were to pull up my intention sheet, it just got two words at the top of it, local and community. And that's basically where I want to do my investing. And so last year I started on a journey, thought it was just going to be a simple little thing. I would look out there and find a few opportunities for local investing. And it kind of grew on me. So I took a look at around at what had been going on in the community. I talked to a lot of people. People were very generous with their time. And so I put together a few notes. You have them in your handout with some resources. I'm not going to go through all of that because it's too much to go through, but we'll touch on a few of the points as we go through it. Again, so disclaimer like Kirby, I'm not giving financial advice. You guys got to figure out your own investments and taxes. And I also will say I'm just a regular person. I don't have a lot of money. I do live, as Tom was saying, with some privilege, and I'm grateful for what I do have, but I don't have a lot of money. And I'm going to need some of it when I'm mining, so I got to hold on to some of it as well. So that's a factor in thinking about this also. So let's start with giving local. And I'll share with you guys some of the things I learned on my journey, and maybe they'll be useful to you no matter how much money you have. So I don't have to tell you that Greenville is a really generous community. And as Kirby said, there's plenty of ways to give local in Greenville. And I don't honestly feel like there are any tools missing from my toolbox for that. And of course, probably all of you guys are doing all kinds of giving already. Direct giving time, giving gently used items. But there's 30 areas I want to touch on because not everybody is familiar with them or comfortable with them, but you may already be deep in it, who knows. So one is donor advised funds. So when I started this journey, I kind of thought donor advised funds, that's for like the uber wealthy people, right? Well, no, I mean, they do have minimums, so they're not maybe for everybody, but they can be useful in a number of situations. And a donor advised fund just means that you donate your money to an organization, to a fund, put your money in a fund. It's a donation when you put your money in the fund, and then you can distribute it over time. And you can do that locally with like the Community Foundation Greenville, or you can do it with your brokerage firm and still give locally, right? So you're giving out of your donor advised fund to a nonprofit organization. Then the other area that I knew about, but I hadn't really thought a lot about, was pooled giving. And that's the idea where you pool your money together with other people that you know or don't know, and then you give with greater impact than you would be able to do individually. The cool thing about pooled giving is that you meet other people, you learn about opportunities for giving, and you may find yourself giving to causes that you would never have even known about or considered before. It can be as sophisticated and as big as the United Way, which is a good example of that, or Greenville Women Giving, which is another great example, or it can be as simple and as small as a Sunday school class pooling some money to help a neighbor in need or a family that needs a hand up. But then the other thing I want to mention is venture philanthropy, which honestly, I had never heard that term before I started on this journey. And venture philanthropy is the idea that you donate your money to put in a fund, and then from that fund, you're able to invest the money in that fund in the community over time. And once that investment is returned, let's say it's a loan, it's repaid, you can then invest it again and again. So it is kind of a gift that keeps on giving. And I want to give a shout out. I don't know if Brianna's on the Zoom or not, but I want to give a shout out to Abundance Capital because they are pretty well known in Greenville for that. And through them, you have the opportunity, I had the opportunity to invest in an opportunity for a loan to Homes of Hope, working on affordable housing. I also have some good news, hot off the press, that they're about to do a program with First Steps. Derek Lewis and First Steps in Greenville to be able to invest and expand a loan fund to have low interest loans to help expand our childcare capacity, which we so desperately need. So it is a, good way to get involved. And also the MICA program that I think those guys have spoken here at Village Engage before. The MICA program is another example of that. They focus on individuals, where if you donate money into their fund, then they're going to loan it to individuals to help them escape predatory lending situations or maybe help them get through a tight spot. So they focus on individuals. So there are a lot of ways to give locally, and there's a lot of worthy causes. And, I have to admit that I do give, and I know you guys do, but there's only so much I can give. I can't give all my money away. I will need it when I'm 90, and I need to think about other ways to be more intentional with the money that I do hold until I'm 90. So just like we were talking about, I was looking at this group said, I was looking at how can you invest locally. So I was really excited about that, and I thought, okay, I'm going to I'm going to find a simple way to do that. I'm going to find an easy investment, and I can put some of my money in that, and it'll be the causes that I want. And so I have to say, just as Kirby said, there are lots of ways to give, not so many ways to invest. So she's already covered pretty well the first one that I was going to talk about, which is the easiest thing to do is to open a checking account, a savings account, or get a CD with a CDFI, local CDFI, like Step Up Credit Union that she mentioned, or Optus Bank, which is the only minority bank unbanked in South Carolina. But I also looked at some other options. So I looked at investment crowdfunding, and I looked at angel investing. And I will say there weren't a lot of options there. There were local options, but there weren't a lot. And they weren't aimed at the things I wanted to invest in, affordable housing, supporting entrepreneurs, those kinds of things. And they were a little rich for me and risky for me for what I wanted to do. So I didn't spend a lot of time on those. But then I started looking at how can I do what you might term local impact investing. So again, I kept talking to people, asking, surely there's something out there. Well, as far as I can see, there is not. So I was like, really? I'm surprised. Greenville's a big place, right? Very generous place. Why not? So I started looking at other communities and found that other communities have options we don't have. So I'll give you an example. In Asheville, there's an organization called Mountain BizWorks. They're in North Carolina, CDFI, and if you're a North Carolina resident, you can invest as little as $1,000 or, a lot more if you want to, in their investment fund. And once you invest in their investment fund, they are a little bit like our Community Works organization here. They support entrepreneurs and small businesses, particularly those who have trouble accessing capital. So you can invest $1,000 or more, terms of 1 to 7 years, and you get 3% interest returned to you. And they have a really incredible track record of paying that. I want that in Greenville. I want us to have that. And I don't know why we don't. So I'm hopeful that if enough of us want that kind of investment opportunity, and we're willing to put our money where our mouth is, then we'll be able to make that happen. I have been encouraged by some conversations I've had with the South Carolina Community Loan Fund, and they may be a resource for us going forward. I'm just not sure. But we have some opportunity in this area. So I was sharing this information with a dear friend, and she doesn't mind calling me out. She's actually on the video on Zoom. She doesn't mind calling me out and saying, if you're thinking about being intentional with your money, if you don't talk about your spend, you're not really thinking about the whole picture. And of course, she was right. So, we don't all have a lot of money we can give. We don't have a lot of money. Some people don't have a lot of money that they can invest or even feel comfortable investing. But we all spend, and we all have choices about how we spend. So buying local is really about making those choices And there are lots of different ways we can make choices. I made a list of them, but you can make your own list of those. The key thing is about relationship, though. It's about community and about relationship. And it's about knowing who you're buying from. What are their business practices? What do they think about sustainability? Are they sustainable? Where do they get their products? How do they treat their employees, their customers? Are they welcoming to everybody? So it's about building that relationship and getting to know those folks that you want to either use their services or buy products from. And we don't, one thing I'll just throw out a couple of points. Your dollars that are spent locally recirculate and have a multiplier effect. They can recirculate as many as 6 to 15 times in the community. So it's a powerful force when we buy locally. And plus, businesses, local businesses, small businesses have been shown to give more generally, 250% more than large corporations when you're thinking about sports teams and nonprofits and also events. So they also give back to our community. And then, of course, they create part of the vitality of the place that we love so much. So the key is to know the business, to know their practice, ask them. They will be happy to tell you about it. And then I just want to shout out to a few standouts. You can make your own list of people that you love. I know a little short list here. So first, the Village Launch Market. Gosh, dog, you want to support local entrepreneurs? You can't do any better than that, right? What about the Swamp Rabbit Cafe? Don't we all love the Swamp Rabbit Cafe? They have an incredible commitment to local farmers and local suppliers, but also to their employees and their employment practices. I mean, they even get their employees sabbaticals after so long. Well, that's impressive, right? Then there's like the Jasmine Kitchen. Who couldn't love the Jasmine Kitchen, right? They're a social enterprise arm of a nonprofit organization that focuses on supporting survivors of sex trafficking, prostitution, and substance abuse disorder. And then, of course, the kitchen sink, right? So they are these are all restaurants. I realize most of them are, but anyway, the kitchen sink has a strong commitment to green and sustainable practices in their business. I read a little bit about what they do and how they approach it, and it's amazing. So, so think about your standouts, who you love, and what you know about them, and make your list and go back to them over and over again. Support them, help them grow. And finally, beyond the choices that we each individually make, I just want to take a minute. I know you know this, but to remind you that we also have influence. Each of us have a sphere of influence around us. Maybe we're responsible for the finances at our church. Maybe we are on the board at a homeowners association. Maybe we have some influence in the things our companies buy or our, organization we volunteer with, or maybe we're on the board with. How can we influence those organizations to be more intentional and mindful and local in the things that they do? And I really feel like that there are a lot of options to buy local. We have more small businesses here than any other county in the state. And I believe a small change can make a big difference. So I would say that's pretty much it for me. Why don't we open the floor for questions? And you guys on Zoom, if you have questions, if you want to put them in the chat, then I think we'll see them up here and be able to respond to them. So if they have any, if you'll just say who your question's for, then we'll know who to pass the mic to.
I have a question. Could you please go back over those? I think you had 4 local businesses. You started with Village Launch, right?
Right, so I started with Village Launch, the Village Launch Market. So these guys can talk more about that than I can, but it's about supporting entrepreneurs that have been through the Village Launch program. Dan, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah.
It's in here too, just so you know what she was talking about. So they're like.
Okay. Okay, that are all of these nonprofits?
No, so, well, I mean,
Then tell me how would I invest in these?
so these were under the category buy and local.
Oh,
But
buying.
let's talk about Village Launch for a minute. Maybe Dan, you can talk about how you can invest in Village Launch.
Yeah, I mean, you can actually do that. Yeah, every second Saturday, we, shut down part of the street up here and have 20+ businesses that some come through our program, some are not, but they're all local minority or women-owned businesses, that have amazing goods and crafts, art and products and food you can buy and support. And for many of them, it's their first time actually getting their product out there, so they're getting great customer feedback from potential would-be long-term customers on how they could maybe grow and scale their business. And then, so that's gonna say financially buy. And some people, they fall in love with these things and they start following them on social media. They can buy from them outside of the market. They do deliveries and you can buy online, of, local businesses. But you can also invest in some of the companies that have kind of high growth potential. We work closely with Abundance Capital, which she talked about earlier, where you can actually use your tax deductible gifts, maybe from a donor advised fund or just a tax deductible gift and a donation to Abundance, as little as $100. You could give $100 to Abundance. Abundance can actually put it in a fund with Village Launch. And then we take that money, Village Launch team has a group of advisors full of other Black businesses, Black attorneys, Black accountants, that then make recommendations on where that money goes. So they've made now $120,000 of investments in just 2 companies, and their goal is to do 2 more here in the next couple months. So we're pooling it, and there's about 30 to 40 people, some giving as little as $100 and some giving $100,000, literally everything in between. And that money gets pulled together, and then the Village Launch team recommends making investments, which are more or less very, very low interest loans that are very riskier that, CDFI like Community Works wouldn't even necessarily invest in yet, or a bank, obviously. So it kind of becomes like a friends and family fund. Thinking of that, that's how I kind of try to tell it. It's friends and family for Village Launch businesses, because so many of our businesses might not have a wealthy aunt or uncle to invest. And that's so many great American companies get started. It's with the aunt or uncle that can pitch in and help their business kind of get off the ground, or buy a vehicle, or buy commercial supplies, whatever it might be. So we do have a fund kind of like with Abundance, a way to do that. So
I appreciate that because I didn't realize that you had that opportunity even available.
it's very new. This is only we're in the first year. We're in our first year. But there are a lot of ways you can not only just do it with us, but community. Can I shout about Community Works? And then just if you're invested on the board at Community Works, you can also use your church resources to make an investment in Community Works, where they can then go invest it in companies, first-time home buyers, affordable housing projects. So there's also, and you can also do all kinds of creative things with the CDFI. So I just think if you're not familiar with CDFIs, just Googling it, learning, I'm sure there's great YouTube videos, but Community Works is a great place where you can do very similar things to what I just mentioned, but on a bigger scale.
I'll mention about Community Works. I did talk with them. So I think if you want to donate funds to Community Works, they're a great resource to accept donations. And they do put it to work with entrepreneurs and small businesses in the area. So that's great. They are not at this moment willing to accept individual investments that are less than $200,000. So that was a little bit too rich for my blood, so I couldn't quite make that happen. So they're just not ready to take what you would consider retail investments from, me and 300 of my closest friends or whatever. So I'm hopeful that they'll change their mind, but at the moment, you can still support them through donations for sure. And they do great work.
There's a new fund at United Ministries called the Hosea Fund. Are you familiar with that? Is that along the Hosea Fund? It's probably with, Self-Help Credit Union. I know they have established a new fund with United Ministries.
It's to support eviction to help avoid eviction?
Yes,
For
yes,
it's
yes.
eviction protection?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how it worked. Do you know, can you share with us? Do you know?
I don't know many details. I know our church has committed some funds to it.
Right.
But I don't know that it's like an investment. It may just be,
My guy just, I think it's probably very similar to the MICA fund. So
Yeah.
you get to the MICA fund, which is doing, like they're partnering with, Miracle Hill and they, cause Miracle Hill has car lots. And so somebody might need a vehicle and they can get a, less expensive vehicle through Miracle Hill. And then MICA will provide at a very attractive rate, the car loan, instead of someone going to a buy here, pay here place where they'll get a terrible car and be charged a fortune. But if you invest in the MICA fund, it's a donation. You are not the fund insurance, so it has loans, and I think that's probably the same as a Hosea fund. But you're not gonna get your money back. What you do get is just the sense of well-being that your fund, you're not just given, it's not just going to one person. That money is then gonna be paid back and used over and over and over, which is just a really powerful way to have impact.
and like you said, to keep people from being evicted, you know. keep people
Absolutely.
housed.
And we could probably, I don't want to speak for Alicia, but Matt Rollins, who's on your team, is deeply involved in that. And maybe there's some information we could send out about the Hosea Fund after the session.
But it seems like you get a tax write-off on that.
Oh, you do, absolutely. It's, those are donations.
Yeah.
And they are, you get their tax advantage because they've set up nonprofits. One other thing to add on, because you all talked about, community works. So, I mean, at Suffolk Credit Union. So like I have a CD, you were talking about a CD. And it's 100% federally insured. It's a market rate return. So it's a really, really safe investment, like if you put your money in a bank. And the difference with Suffolk Credit Union than me putting it in Wells Fargo, where I have other investments, is their target market is different. So like they literally have a very active goal of funding mortgages to first generation home buyers, primarily women of color. So that's just not going to be the target that Wells Fargo is going to have. Maybe part of their target that's very strategic. But then one other thing that I've done, because I sort of sent that money over there and don't think about it, and I will say it's money that I'm not depending upon for my retirement. I've also told Suffolk Credit Union that if someone comes in and they need just a little extra oomph to make them bankable, that they can use my CD as collateral until that person either gets their loan paid to where. So not only are the funds going to self-help to help them lend, but it can also be used to collateralize a loan for someone else. And so that's already happened. And the woman that it allowed her to get a car, I mean, like, it's just, and it's all anonymous. But it's just really cool hearing the stories, and that's just a whole nother layer of potential impact. That again, that's risky, because if she doesn't pay her loan back, they can come against my CD, which I said, that's okay, but it didn't happen. And self-help was really good about developing relationships with their borrowers. So they're gonna work really, really hard to help make sure they are building up their credit and making.
Jen, you had a question?
I have a couple of suggestions and then ask a question. Just a few to tag onto the Village Launch Market. The Village Launch website also has a directory of graduates. So for some of those more service-based businesses that wouldn't be at the market, it may be a little funky right now. You may have to do some clicking, but it does have every alumni of the program. So, you know, I think like you said, if you have the opportunity to individually get to know business owners, that's amazing. But there's some great resources, Village Launch being one, where there's sort of a pool directory. So depending on the cause that, you know, matters to you, the upstate has an LGBTQ chamber. So, you know, if that's a cause you care about, that's a pooling of businesses, that you could look at. Swamp Rabbit does a great job of highlighting their farmers, but, South Carolina has, certified South Carolina grown. So, if you're looking for products in maybe larger retailers or, pooled retailers, that's something you could look for. So there's a lot of examples of those kind of things.
Ideas to add to our action.
Yeah. But my question, oh, so wait, you said, did you, oh, you just, okay.
No, I was just saying, thank you, that's
Oh,
great
thank you.
ideas.
Okay, my question, and I guess this is for Kirby, or any of you who know that can easily answer this. What is the difference in a donor advised fund and just annual individual giving?
So the nice thing about a donor advised fund is that you can give a large amount of money in 1 year to kind of pool your charitable giving in a year, which may be a tax move that's good for you. And then, in following years, that money is coming out of the fund.
Got it.
So it's a strategic move tax wise.
So,
That's mainly how I think about it.
so it could end up being distributed similarly year after
could.
year. It's just a matter of when you're putting it in.
Right.
Got it.
Can I add another point to that? The other thing that you can do if you happen to get lucky with a stock and you have a high level of stock appreciation, you can donate stock. It goes at market value. You don't have to recognize the capital gains from the stock. And then they liquidate the stock and it becomes part of your donor advised fund to then be able to distribute as donations. And of course, you can give.
You can do that directly
Yeah,
with companies. if
That's
they have
about where I was about to go, because you can also give stock, like I know Victoria and My Neighbor's Voice, you can give stock to them. So a lot of nonprofits, you can give stock to them. But you can get stock directly, but you can use that with your donor advised fund as well, which is another, as Kirby was saying, another tax advantage.
Thank you.
That's a question for Tom. So you talked about your experience with CCA and kind of you did some due diligence, to realize, hey, this is not where I want to have my money invested. Have you done the opposite ever where maybe somebody had fallen out of favor because of discrimination suits or labor practices or things like that, but they cleaned up their act? Maybe they got a change in leadership or change in culture or something where you said, you penalize companies who didn't take your money out. Have you ever rewarded them and say, you know what, I like where they're going now. I am gonna invest in them.
That's a great question. And the answer is no. I have not. I think that's something that's worthy of thought. I don't do individual stock investing at all, so I'm in funds, which makes it a little bit more difficult to do that. But the reward concept makes sense.
Thanks.
Like a question along those lines, we're the same, and we don't do individual stocks, but those funds, and that just seems like a massive task to. I mean, I guess you have to go to each fund that you're invested in and look at their report and see, go through. I don't know a whole lot about it, so this is a very basic question. So I guess I'm asking a little more nuts and bolts, how you would.
Yeah, I think that would be an approach you could take if you were an individual stockholder as opposed to mutual funds. Mutual funds have hundreds of holdings in them as a minimum typically. And so from a practical standpoint, it'd be very difficult to do that.
So I mean, is the resource that you mentioned applicable for mutual funds or?
Yeah, the as you sow is, it is only for mutual funds. It's not for individual stocks. So
So you could go to that website and see.
you can go to that website. I mean, you have to look up, first go to your mutual funds website and find the holdings, or I'm sorry, just find the ticker symbol. Put the ticker symbol into as you sow, and it will show you, like I said, the A through F grade, and then it'll show you the individual holdings of why it got that grade. So if, for instance, it got a C in fossil fuels, well, it's because of these two companies, and here's what these do.
Gotcha.
Now, and this goes kind of back to what this gentleman was asking too. There's mutual fund companies that are closely watching the behavior of their holdings and are including or excluding things as things change. That's really a job for a fund manager, honestly, unless you had all the time in the world and you were very inclined to do that type of research. But that's why looking at the fund managers that, of the mutual funds that you are holding is so important. There's some that, you know, are investing with purpose and conscience and intention. There's others that are really just bottom line focused.
We got time for one more question, I think, before we need to wrap up.
Kirby, so I know, we use, we invest in funds as well, but they are inherently, they have social screens in them. So there are actual mutual funds that are put through the screen. It's not perfect. But we sit down with our advisor and say, we don't want, they literally say, tell us what you don't want or what you want. Now, there is stuff called, y'all may have heard of greenwashing. So like one of the things we want is companies that are doing their best to be good environmental stewards. And there are things they can do that sort of, it's like whitewashing, make it look good when it really isn't. So not that these funds are the best at going deep, but it's at least something. Do you have a perspective on like socially responsible, there's a name for them, ESG or something?
Yeah, ESG funds, ESG just stands for environmental, social, and governance screening. And yeah, so like the mutual funds that we use at Natural Investments are those types of funds. They're socially and environmentally screened funds. The thing with greenwashing, I mean, if you're a mutual fund company, you can put whatever name you want on your fund. You can name it the, you know, sunshine granola, solar, blah, blah, blah.
That's important.
There's the regulation in this field is trying to catch up. But I kind of lost my train of thought there, but I guess I would just say that that's why working with an advisor too is really helpful on that journey. And again, just understanding the mutual fund companies that you're working in.
So we had a question from the chat. Let me try to answer that question from the chat. So there was a question in the chat that says, and we'll let this be our last question, but this may have been addressed before, but I hopped on. But here's a question. Does anyone know of an outlet or directory of local Greenville businesses looking for investments where we could help fund them directly via getting equity or offering on low interest funds? And yes, so there is an organization called Vicinity Capital. I think they recently changed their name to just Vicinity. And they have a website where you can do local crowdfunding, and you can see folks like, I think there's one out there now for the Triumph team. They're testing the waters for funding. Boyd Cycle, I think, is one. So they have a few offers out there. Some of the ones that they have listed have already closed. And then there's also in the page that I had, I'm trying to think of the name of it, get to that without throwing these on the floor. There is a Venture South and Upstate Upstarts. If you're an accredited investor, they focus on things in this area as well. So yes, for sure. And some of those are equity investments. So just be aware of that. So it does change your, it has tax implications, it has a lot of implications. So just, but if you're interested in that kind of investment, it's certainly an option for you. Did that answer your question?
Could I add one more?
Yeah, sure.
I think, and you mentioned it too, but we didn't mention it, but like, especially for folks like myself who don't have, you know, I'm not an accredited investor, you know, things on Vicinity, you know, I'm not interested in funding a Hollingsworth pool, as nice as that sounds. I mean, just doing GoFundMe and like going and searching, you mentioned this on here, but like, we have a lot of Village Lawn businesses that they're getting, you know, just searching on GoFundMe or these crowdfunding platforms, you could literally do it with $100 or $1,000 or $10. And so I'm glad you mentioned it, because I do think those are like really simple little ways that you can do the same thing and search in Greenville for little entrepreneurs that are really trying to like get their start on these platforms.
Okay, so
Just to add on to that, there's also a site similar to GoFundMe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, called Solo Funds. And that's actually peer-to-peer lending. So you're going to get your principal, I mean, in theory, you're going to get your principal back with interest. So it is a little different than GoFundMe. more investing than charitable.
So why don't you hold on to that? Because the next thing I want to do is give you guys a chance, each of you to make a final concluding remark. So since you got the mic, I'll let you go first.
Sure. I guess I would just say to remember that, you know, we have so many different levers that we can pull when we are trying to make an impact. Most people think about giving, volunteering, even where you work, but sometimes investments are forgotten. They're just something we don't look at or think about much, or don't want to think about much. But that is a place that, you know, you have some power, and I encourage you just to at least see where you're at and see if you want to make any changes.
I'll go next and then we'll let Tom have the last word on this. So, I know we all feel like there are really powerful forces at work in our economy. But I just want to remind everybody, we are powerful too. We create the economy that we have and the community we have by the individual and collective choices that we make every day. So I don't want us to forget that we are also powerful and we can affect change. So I'll let you have the last word, Tom.
How did I negotiate the last word? You know, we are living in an incredible time. There's a lot going on out there. It is a time when these systems that we've built and lived with all of our lives, I'm an old guy, are seemingly fracturing in a lot of ways. And maybe there's some good that can come out of that. I said I wanted to learn today, and I took a whole page of notes, and grateful for this gathering and the thought that went into it, and wish you all well as you wrestle as I do with what are we going to do with this.
Lisa, you want to close us out?
Sure. Thank you for all of the great resources that we have been presented with. We will make sure that I get all of the things,